Have you ever thought about how dependent we are on the internet? Imagine waking up tomorrow and it's just gone. What would you do? How would you stay connected with friends, work, or even just find information? The internet is such an integral part of our daily lives that it's hard to imagine a world without it. We use it to stay connected with friends and family, to get work done, to access information, and to entertain ourselves. But what if one day we woke up and the internet was just gone? No Google, no social media, no online shopping, no streaming. It's a daunting thought, to say the least. We've become so reliant on the internet that it's hard to remember a time when we didn't have it. And it's not just our personal lives that would be affected. The internet plays a critical role in many industries, from healthcare to finance to education. If the internet were to suddenly disappear, the consequences would be far-reaching and devastating. Our lives would be drastically different without the internet, and it's worth considering what that would look like. Would we go back to using encyclopedias and dictionaries to find information? Would we start using snail mail again to communicate with each other? It's a weird thought, but it's worth exploring. Without the internet, communication would be one of the first things to go. No more social media, no more email, no more video conferencing. We'd have to rely on traditional methods of communication like phone calls and face-to-face conversations. It's hard to imagine how businesses would operate without being able to communicate with clients and customers online. Commerce would also take a huge hit. Online shopping would be a thing of the past, and businesses that rely heavily on e-commerce would struggle to survive. Banks and financial institutions would struggle to operate, and the global economy would likely take a nosedive. Essential services like healthcare and emergency services would also be severely impacted. Hospitals and clinics rely on the internet to access patient records, communicate with other healthcare professionals, and access medical research. Without the internet, medical professionals would have to rely on paper records and verbal communication, which would be much slower and less accurate. Food and water distribution would also be affected, as many companies use the internet to manage their supply chains and logistics. Without the internet, it could be difficult to get food and water to the people who need it. Travel would also become much more difficult, as many airlines, hotels, and travel agencies rely on the internet to book flights and rooms. Without the internet, people would have to rely on travel agents or wait in line at airports and hotels to make travel arrangements. Transportation systems would also be affected, as many traffic management systems and public transit systems rely on the internet to operate. Without the internet, traffic would likely come to a standstill, and public transportation would grind to a halt. Education would also suffer, as many schools and universities rely on the internet to access educational resources, communicate with students, and conduct online courses. Without the internet, students would have to rely on physical textbooks and in-person classes, which would be much more limited. The entertainment industry would also take a hit, as many streaming services and online entertainment platforms would no longer be available. Music and movie piracy would likely increase, as people would have to find other ways to access their favorite music and movies. In the healthcare sector, medical professionals would struggle to access medical research and communicate with other healthcare professionals. Patient records would have to be kept on paper, which would be much slower and less accurate. In the worst-case scenario, the disappearance of the internet could lead to a breakdown in emergency services, as 911 operators and emergency responders rely on the internet to communicate and respond to emergencies. Without the internet, emergency services would have to rely on traditional methods of communication, like radio and phone calls, which would be much slower and less effective. Mass panic could set in as people struggle to cope with the loss of the internet. People would have to find new ways to access information, communicate with each other, and get things done. It would be a difficult and chaotic time, and it's worth considering how we would adapt to such a scenario. In conclusion, the internet plays a critical role in our daily lives, and its disappearance would have far-reaching and devastating consequences. It's worth considering how we would cope without the internet and what we can do to mitigate the risks of such an event. So, how would you cope without the internet? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to check out our other videos for more thought-provoking content.